The neon light of Aurelia cast an eerie blue glow across Lena Archer's face as she stared out from her apartment window. The floating city hovered majestically above the acid wastelands of Nova Terra, humanity's new home since Earth had become uninhabitable centuries ago. From her vantage point, on the 157th floor, the cityscape stretched like a web of light against the perpetual dusk of the planet's atmosphere. Yet it wasn't the view that held her attention, but the numbers floating above the heads of pedestrians far below, glowing dates that only she and others like her could see. 3070912, 31550430, 2011209. Death dates. Everyone had one. A cosmic expiration stamped above their heads like price tags on merchandise. Everyone except for her. For as long as she could remember. Lena had possessed the ability to see when others would die, but her own reflection showed nothing but empty space where a death date should be. In a society where knowing was power, where entire industries, relationships, and governments were built around the certainty of one's end, Lena existed as an anomaly, a walking question mark. She pressed her palm against the thermoglass window. At 27, she had long stopped searching for answers about why she couldn't see her own death date. The orphanage administrators had tested her extensively as a child, concluding she had a rare neural mutation that allowed her to perceive death dates but blocked self-perception. They had labeled her categorized deficient and moved on. But Lena knew there was more to the story. There had to be. Her neural implant pulsed with an incoming notification, projecting onto her retina. Another government announcement. Mandatory death date registry. Update. All citizens must verify their projected expiration within 72 hours. Unverified individuals will face restricted movement privileges. Lena sighed. The policies grew stricter every year. Nova Terra society had evolved into a rigid two-tier system, the death-dated, who lived structured lives around their expiration, and the rare, mysterious, eternal gems, people whose death dates couldn't be seen. The latter were revered by some, feared by most, and hunted by the government for special observation. She had managed to forge documentation for years, claiming a distant death date that would never come under scrutiny during her lifetime. It was dangerous, but necessary. Revealing herself as different would mean immediate government detainment. A sharp knock startled her from her thoughts. Lena's heart raced. No one ever visited her. She approached the door cautiously, activating the security feed. Outside stood a boy, perhaps 12 or 13, with wild dark hair and frightened eyes. His clothes were torn, and his face was smudged with the distinctive rusty residue of the lower levels. "Please," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "They're coming." Lena hesitated. The boy shouldn't have been able to access her residential level without proper clearance. Something was wrong, but when she looked at the space above his head, she froze. Nothing. No death date. Like her, before she could process this revelation. Alarm sirens blared throughout the corridor. Security drones would arrive within minutes. Without thinking further, Lena yanked open the door and pulled the boy inside, sealing it behind him. "Who are you?" she demanded, keeping her distance. "How did you find me?" The boy's eyes were unnaturally bright against his dirt-streaked face. "My name is Eon, and I found you because you're like me." He pointed above her head. "You're one of the Eternals, and they know about us now." Lena's blood ran cold. Eternals. The word was only whispered in conspiracy circles, those who believed certain individuals would outlive the universe itself. But it couldn't be real. It was mystical nonsense, not science. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said firmly. "You need to leave." "The registry program isn't just for monitoring," Eon interrupted, his voice dropping. "It's for culling. Anyone without a visible death date is being collected, or eliminated." As if to confirm his words, the building's security system announced an emergency lockdown. Through her window, Lena could see government patrol vehicles converging on the building. their searchlights scanning methodically. "They tracked me here," Eon said, panic rising in his voice. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they override your security protocols." Lena's mind raced. She had spent her life avoiding attention, blending in, surviving on the fringes of a society that would cage her if they knew what she was. And now this boy, this stranger claiming impossible things, had brought danger to her doorstep. Yet looking at him, seeing the same emptiness above his head that haunted her own reflection, Lena made her decision. "There's a maintenance shaft behind the kitchen unit," she said, already moving to activate the hidden panels she'd installed years ago as a precaution. "It connects to the building's waste recycling system. If we can reach the lower levels, we might lose them in the industrial sector." As the wall panels slid open, revealing a narrow passage, Lena grabbed her emergency pack, always ready, and thrust a breathing mask toward Eon. "The air gets toxic down there. Put this on when I tell you." The boy nodded, clutching the mask like a lifeline. "There are others," he whispered. "People like us. They're hiding, organizing." Lena hesitated at the entrance to the shaft. "Others? How many?" "Enough to frighten the government," Ian replied. "Enough to matter." Before she could ask more, the apartment's security system announced, "Override initiated. Stand by for authorized entry." "Go!" Lena pushed Eon into the shaft and climbed in after him, sealing the panel just as her apartment door burst open. They scrambled downward through the narrow passage, the sounds of boots and shouted commands fading above them. As they descended into the bowels of Aurelia, Lena's mind whirled with questions. She had spent her entire life believing she was alone in her condition, a statistical anomaly in a world of certainties. The possibility of others like her, of answers to the questions that had haunted her since childhood, both terrified and exhilarated her. But first, they had to survive. The maintenance shaft narrowed as they descended, the air growing thicker with chemical fumes. Lena pulled her mask over her face and signaled for Eon to do the same. They had reached the industrial waste processing level, where Aurelia's pristine upper sectors disposed of their unwanted byproducts. "Stay close," she hissed through her mask. "The recyclers use automated security. They'll stun anything human-sized that isn't tagged with worker credentials." They emerged into a vast chamber filled with sorting machinery. Massive vats of bubbling chemicals processed the city's refuse, extracting usable components while neutralizing toxins. The acidic mist stung Lena's eyes even through her protective gear. "Where are we going?" Eon asked, voice muffled by his mask. "There's an old transit hub 3 sectors east," Lena replied, leading him along a narrow maintenance walkway. "If we can reach it, we might be able to access the Undercity. The government presence is minimal there." "The Undercity is crawling with scavengers," Ian protested. "They'll sell us to the highest bidder." "You got a better idea?" Lena snapped, her nerves fraying. "Because the alternatives are government detention or trying to survive in the acid wastes outside the city." They moved silently through the industrial sector, dodging worker patrols and security drones. Lena had spent years memorizing Aurelia's infrastructure as part of her contingency planning, always preparing for the day her false documentation might fail. She never imagined she'd be using these escape routes because of a strange boy with no death date. After nearly an hour of tense navigation, they reached the abandoned transit hub. Once a bustling nexus for worker transportation, it had been decommissioned when the city upgraded its systems. Now it stood eerily silent, its platforms empty and its tracking systems dead. "We can access the Undercity through the old maintenance tunnels," Lena explained, prying open a rusted access panel. "It'll be a tight fit, but—" "Wait," Eon interrupted, grabbing her arm. "Listen." Lena froze, straining her ears. At first, she heard nothing but the distant hum of industrial machinery. Then she caught it, the faint whir of Gravitech engines. Security drones. "They're tracking us," she whispered. "But how?" Eon's face paled beneath his mask. The registry scan. When they identified me as unregistered, they must have implanted a tracker. That's impossible, Lena argued. You'd have felt it. Not if they used nanobots. Eon's voice shook. They've been developing injectable trackers for years. I heard the others talking about it. The drone sounds grew louder. They had minutes, perhaps seconds. The tunnels won't work, Lena muttered, mind racing. If they can track you, we need something that'll disrupt the signal. She scanned the hub desperately, until her eyes landed on the abandoned power distribution node in the corner. Cover your implant, she ordered, already moving toward the node. The electromagnetic pulse will fry any unshielded tech. But your systems are hardened, standard for anyone working with industrial equipment. She reached the node and began rerouting connections with practiced efficiency. 10 seconds. Shield anything you want to keep functional. Ian pressed a protective hand over his temple where his neural implant sat. Lena finished her sabotage and ducked behind a concrete pillar, pulling Ian with her. The makeshift circuit overloaded with a blinding flash and a wave of energy that made their teeth vibrate. Above them, the approaching drones wavered in midair, then plummeted to the ground with electronic shrieks. In the sudden silence that followed, Lena grabbed Eon's hand. That won't hold them for long. We need to move. They slipped into the maintenance tunnel, sealing the entrance behind them. The passage was dark and narrow, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees through decades of accumulated grime. The air grew thinner as they progressed. Their breathing labored even through the masks. You still haven't told me how you found me, Lena said as they paused at a junction to catch their breath. Eon hesitated. The Eternals have been watching you for years. We have people in the registry office who flag anomalies in the system. What anomalies? People like us who use forged death dates. His eyes met hers in the dim emergency lighting. Your hack was good, but the algorithms are getting better at detecting inconsistencies. Lena felt a chill despite the tunnel's heat. You've been monitoring me? Not me personally, Ian clarified. I was sent to warn you. They're doing a purge, systematic identification and capture of all unmarked individuals. You were on today's list. Who sent you? The Resistance. People like us who refuse to be hunted like animals. He paused, lowering his voice. People who know the truth about what we are. Before Lena could press further, a distant rumble shook the tunnel. Dust and debris rained down on them. They're breaching the sealed sectors, Lena realized. We need to keep moving. They continued their grueling journey through the maintenance tunnels, eventually emerging into the cavernous expanse of Aurelia's Undercity. Unlike the gleaming towers above, the Undercity was a labyrinth of makeshift structures, black markets, and forgotten infrastructure. The air was thick with unfiltered pollutants, and the light came primarily from salvaged neon signs and patchwork power grids. Lena led Eon through winding alleys, avoiding the main thoroughfares where government informants might lurk. They kept their masks on, blending with the Undercity residents who commonly wore protective gear against the toxic atmosphere. Where are we going? Ian asked, sticking close to Lena's side as they navigated the chaotic sprawl. To someone who might help us, Lena replied tersely. If she's still alive. They approached a structure that appeared cobbled together from salvaged ship parts and industrial debris. A crude sign hung above the entrance. Nova Tech Repairs. Lena knocked in a specific pattern, then waited. After a long moment, a section of the wall slid aside, revealing not a door, but a narrow scanner. A mechanical voice demanded, "Identification. Tell Ghost that her debt for the Sector 7 job still stands." Lena said clearly. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the wall reconfigured, opening into a cluttered workshop filled with disassembled technology and holographic interfaces. In the center stood a woman with intricate cybernetic augmentations visible along her arms and neck. Her dark hair was styled in an elaborate undercut, and her eyes, one natural, one clearly artificial, regarded them with suspicion. "Lena Archer," the woman said, her voice carrying a synthetic undertone. "I thought you'd be dead by now." "Nice to see you, too." "Ghost," Lena replied dryly. Kara, Ghost. Tran had been Aurelia's premier black market tech specialist for as long as Lena had known her. They'd crossed paths years ago when Lena needed her first set of forged documentation. Ghost was dangerous, unpredictable, and completely amoral, but she hated the government with a passion that made her a valuable, if unreliable, ally. Ghost's artificial eye whirred as it focused on Ian. "Who's the kid?" "Someone the government wants badly enough to trigger a sector-wide manhunt," Lena explained. "We need to disappear for a while." Ghost's expression hardened. "You brought government heat to my door. Are you insane?" "They don't know we're here," Lena countered. "And you owe me, remember? The security bypass that kept you out of a detention cell." Ghost scowled, but gestured them further inside. The door sealed behind them with multiple security protocols engaging audibly. "You've got 10 minutes to tell me what's going on," Ghost said, dropping into a chair surrounded by screens. "Then I decide if I'm helping or handing you over for the bounty that's probably already on your heads." Lena glanced at Aeon, who nodded slightly. Taking a deep breath, she began to explain about the registry purge, their escape, and the government's sudden interest in people without visible death dates. Ghost listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Lena finished, the tech specialist leaned back, studying them both intently. "Show me," she finally said. "Show you what?" Lena asked, though she already knew. "Don't play dumb," Ghost snapped. "I want to see what makes you two so special." Lena hesitated, then stepped closer to Ghost. "Look above my head. What do you see?" Ghost's augmented eye whirred again, scanning. "Nothing. No date. Now look at him." Lena nodded toward Ian. Ghost turned her gaze to the boy. After a moment, she let out a low whistle. "The same. Nothing." She looked back at Lena. "So the rumors are true? There really are people who can't be read." "It's more than that," Ian spoke up. "We're not just unreadable, we're unlimited." Ghost raised an eyebrow. "Unlimited how?" "The death dates aren't just predictions," Ian explained. "They're constraints, quantum locks on human consciousness. Everyone has a predetermined endpoint, except us." "That's ridiculous," Ghost scoffed. "Death dates are just a weird evolutionary quirk that developed after the Great Migration, some kind of collective consciousness phenomenon." "That's what they want everyone to think," Ian insisted. "But the truth is, they engineered it." "They?" Lena asked. "The Core Temporal Institute," Ian said, his voice dropping to a whisper despite the workshop's security. "They created the death date perception as a control mechanism, a way to make humanity accept its limitations." Ghost laughed, but the sound held no humor. "Kid, I've heard some conspiracy theories in my time, but that's..." "It's true," Ian cut her off, "and I can prove it. The Resistance has found the original code, the quantum algorithm that introduced the death date perception into human consciousness." A heavy silence fell over the workshop. Lena's mind reeled with the implications. If what Ian was saying was true, it would upend everything humanity had accepted as natural for generations. Ghost was the first to speak. "So what does the government want with you unlimited people?" "We're a threat," Ian said simply. "Our existence proves their system is artificial, and more importantly, we can potentially disrupt it." "How?" Lena asked. Ian looked at her with those unnaturally bright eyes. "Because if enough of us combine our quantum signatures, we can break the algorithm. We can free everyone from their predetermined endings. Ghost stood suddenly, moving to a secure terminal. Her fingers flew over the interface. Government patrols are intensifying. They've locked down 3 sectors already, and they're moving inward. Whatever you two are planning, you need to do it fast. Lena caught Eon's gaze. Is there somewhere safe? A place where the resistance gathers? The boy nodded. There's a hidden enclave in the abandoned research district, but getting there won't be easy, especially now. I might be able to help with that, Ghost interjected, still focused on her screens. But it'll cost you. What do you want? Lena asked warily. Ghost turned, her cybernetic eye gleaming. Access to this algorithm Eon mentioned. If it exists, it's the most valuable piece of code in human history. That's not my decision to make, Eon protested. The Resistance doesn't have much choice. Ghost cut him off. You need my help to reach them, and I need something worth risking my life for. Seems fair to me. Lena placed a restraining hand on Eon's shoulder. Let's focus on staying alive first. If we can reach the Resistance, we can negotiate terms then. Ghost studied them for a moment, then nodded sharply. Fine, but I'm coming with you. No one touches that code without me present. You're leaving your business behind? Lena asked, surprised. Ghost gestured around the cluttered workshop. This place has been compromised the moment you walked in. Besides, she added with a grim smile, I've been looking for a good reason to disappear for a while. The government's been a little too interested in my operation lately. She moved to a back wall and pressed her palm against an unmarked section. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing an impressive arsenal of weapons and equipment. Suit up, Ghost ordered, already selecting items for herself. We're taking the waste tunnels to the old research district. It's not pleasant, but it's the only way to avoid the security cordons. As Lena helped Eon select appropriate gear, she whispered, Can we trust her? We don't have much choice, he replied softly. But the Resistance has dealt with Ghost before. She's self-interested, but reliable once paid. And this algorithm you mentioned, is it real? Eon's expression grew solemn. Very real, and more dangerous than you can imagine. Fully equipped with survival gear, weapons, and Ghost's specialized tech, they prepared to venture into one of the most hazardous sections of Aurelia, the abandoned tunnels that ran beneath the waste processing facilities and out toward the city's edge. These passages, rarely traversed even by the Undercity's most desperate inhabitants, offered their best chance of evading detection. The tunnels are partially flooded with processed waste, Ghost warned as she led them through a hidden access point in her workshop. The protective suits will keep out most of the toxins, but limit exposure time. Anything over 4 hours, and even these filters won't help. The passage they entered was narrow and poorly lit, with only Ghost's augmented vision guiding them through the darkness. The walls glistened with condensation that carried a faint, sickly luminescence, a byproduct of the chemical treatments used in waste processing. Stay in the center of the tunnel, Ghost instructed. The runoff along the sides is concentrated enough to eat through your suit within minutes. They moved in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. For Lena, the past few hours had shattered the careful isolation she had maintained for years. She had spent her life hiding what she was, convincing herself that her condition was nothing more than a genetic anomaly. Now, faced with Eon's revelations and the government's sudden aggression, she couldn't ignore the implications. If they were truly Eternals, people who would outlive the universe itself, what did that mean? And more importantly, why would someone engineer a system to hide this potential from humanity? We're approaching the junction, Ghost announced, interrupting Lena's thoughts. From here, we have 3 possible routes. 2 lead to security checkpoints. 1 leads to the research district. Which one is safest? Lena asked. Ghost's laugh echoed eerily in the tunnel. None of them are safe, but the research district route passes through the acid storm drainage system. Most patrols avoid it because of the corrosion risk. Then that's our path, Lena decided. They turned onto a declining passage where the floor was covered with a shallow stream of pale green liquid. Their protective boots hissed softly as the material reacted with the acidic flow. Above them, massive pipes dripped condensation that sizzled when it hit the stream. This system channels the acid rain from the upper city down to the neutralization plants, Ghost explained. During heavy storms, these tunnels can fill completely within minutes. If we hear the flood warnings, we run, no questions, no hesitation. As if summoned by her words, a distant alarm began to wail. Ghost cursed, checking a device on her wrist. "Storm front moving in faster than predicted," she muttered. "We have maybe 15 minutes before the floodgates open. Move." They broke into a run, splashing through the shallow acid stream as the alarm grew louder. The tunnel began to vibrate slightly as massive machinery somewhere above them prepared to channel the incoming storm. "There." Ghost pointed ahead to where the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. "The maintenance lift to the research district. If we can reach it before the flooding starts." A sudden explosion rocked the tunnel behind them, sending them stumbling. Lena caught Eon as he fell, pulling him upright. "What was that?" she gasped. Ghost's expression was grim behind her mask. "Not what. Who? Someone's blasted through the security barriers. We've got company." As if to confirm her assessment, the beam of a tactical light cut through the tunnel behind them, followed by the mechanical voice of a security drone. "Unauthorized personnel detected. Remain in place for processing." "Run!" Ghost barked, firing a disruptor pulse back toward the drone. The electronic screech told them she'd scored a hit, but more lights were already visible in the distance. They sprinted toward the maintenance platform, the acid splashing higher as the tunnel's slope increased. The chamber ahead was a massive vertical shaft that extended both up toward Dessau, the city, and down into darkness. A rusted maintenance platform hung precariously from ancient cables, swaying slightly in the updraft from below. "Get on!" Ghost commanded, slamming her fist onto the activation panel. The platform groaned in protest, but held as they piled onto it. Behind them, the first of the security forces emerged into the tunnel, human officers in full environmental gear, accompanied by hovering drones. One spotted them and raised his weapon. "Ghost!" Lena shouted in warning. The tech specialist whirled, raising a small device from her belt. "Cover your eyes!" Lena pulled Eon against her, shielding his face as a blinding flash erupted from Ghost's device. When she looked back, the tunnel entrance was obscured by a thick cloud of caustic smoke. "Localized acid accelerant," Ghost explained with grim satisfaction as the platform lurched upward. "That'll keep them busy." As they ascended through the vertical shaft, emergency sirens continued to wail. Through gaps in the shaft walls, they caught glimpses of the city above and the massive storm rolling in from the wastelands. The acid rain had already begun, sizzling against the protective dome that covered Aurelia's upper levels. "The research district is outside the main dome," Ghost warned as they neared the top of the shaft. "We'll need to move quickly once we exit. The protective canopy there is deteriorating." The platform ground to a halt at a maintenance level that opened onto what had once been Aurelia's premier scientific complex. Now, the research district stood abandoned, its laboratories and housing units slowly being reclaimed by Novaterra's caustic environment. Skeletal buildings loomed through the acid fog, their exteriors corroded into bizarre, almost organic shapes. "This way," Eon said with unexpected confidence. Taking the lead, the entrance to the enclave is hidden in the old xenobiology complex. They move swiftly through the desolate landscape, acid rain pattering against their protective suits. Overhead, the partial canopy that once shielded the district had deteriorated into a patchwork of transparent sections and gaping holes. Through these openings, the full fury of Novaterra's atmosphere lashed down, creating pools of concentrated acid that they carefully circumnavigated. "How much farther?" Ghost asked, checking her wrist device. The storm's intensifying. In 10 minutes, even these suits won't hold up. Almost there, Ian assured her, navigating the ruins with surprising familiarity. The complex is just beyond that ridge. They crested a small rise and beheld a massive structure that appeared more intact than its surroundings. Once the crown jewel of Aurelia's scientific community, the xenobiology complex had been designed to withstand extreme conditions for its delicate experiments. Its reinforced architecture had weathered Nova Terra's assault better than most. Ian led them to what appeared to be a collapsed entrance, covered in rubble and corrosion. He moved directly to a specific section of debris and began manipulating it in a precise pattern. "Hurry," Lena urged, glancing nervously at the storm. The acid rain was falling in sheets now, reducing visibility to mere meters. With a final adjustment, Ian stepped back as the apparent rubble reconfigured, revealing a hidden entrance. "Inside, quickly!" They ducked through the opening, which sealed seamlessly behind them. Finding themselves in a decontamination chamber, they followed automated instructions to remove their protective gear. Powerful jets sprayed neutralizing compounds over their suits before a green light indicated it was safe to proceed. Beyond the chamber lay a marvel that left Lena speechless. What appeared ruined from outside was, within, a thriving community. The vast interior space of the complex had been transformed into a self-contained ecosystem. Hydroponic gardens grew in spiral patterns up the walls, providing both food and oxygen. Repurposed laboratory equipment served as living quarters, medical facilities, and communal areas. And everywhere, people moved with purpose, at least 50 individuals of varying ages. Most striking of all was what Lena saw, or rather, didn't see, above their heads. Not a single death date was visible on anyone. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Ian said, his voice filled with pride. "Home of the Eternals." A tall woman with silver-streaked hair approached them. Her bearing was authoritative, her gaze sharp and assessing as it moved from Ian to Lena to Ghost. "You've returned earlier than expected, Ian," she noted, "and with more than one recruit." "The situation escalated, Professor Novick," Ian explained. "The government has initiated a full purge. Lena was targeted directly." The woman, Professor Novick, studied Lena with renewed interest. "Lena Archer, we've been watching your case for some time. Your genetic profile is exceptional, even among our kind." "You've been studying me?" Lena asked, uncomfortable with the revelation. "We monitor all potential Eternals," Novick clarified. "It's necessary for our survival." Her gaze shifted to Ghost. "And who is this? She's not one of us." Ghost crossed her arms defensively. "I'm the reason they made it here alive. Kara Tran. But most people call me Ghost. The black market tech specialist." Novick identified her immediately. "Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours." "Professor Ria Novick," Ghost replied coolly. "Former head researcher at the Core Temporal Institute before your mysterious disappearance 10 years ago, presumed dead in an accident." Novick's expression tightened. "My past is well documented, yes. What matters is the present, and the future we're fighting to protect." She turned back to Ian. "Were you followed?" "We took precautions," he assured her, "but the government response was aggressive, more than we anticipated." "They're escalating their timeline," Novick murmured, concern evident. "We need to move forward with the plan." "What plan?" Lena interjected. "I've been dragged across half the city, hunted by government forces, and told I'm part of some cosmic anomaly called Eternals. I think I deserve some actual explanations now." Novick regarded her thoughtfully. "You're right. Of course. Come with me, all of you. It's time you understood what we're truly facing." She led them deeper into the complex, through areas where advanced technology had been salvaged and repurposed. They entered what had once been the main research laboratory, now converted into a command center. Holographic displays showed real-time data from throughout Aurelia, including security deployments and government communications. "How are you accessing government channels?" Ghost asked, professionally impressed. "We have allies in unexpected places," Novik replied enigmatically. She activated a central holographic projector, which displayed a complex mathematical equation that slowly rotated in 3 dimensions. "This," she said gravely, "is the source code of humanity's greatest deception, the quantum algorithm that creates the death date phenomenon." Lena stared at the equation, understanding some of its advanced physics principles but not its full implications. "You're saying someone created the death dates artificially? That they're not a natural evolution?" "Precisely." Novik manipulated the projection, expanding certain sections. "After the Great Migration to Nova Terra, humanity faced a crisis of purpose. Earth was gone. Our species had been forcibly transplanted to an inhospitable world. Suicide rates soared. Society fragmented." She continued, her voice taking on a lecturer's rhythm. "The newly formed government, desperate for stability, funded a secret project at the Core Temporal Institute. Their goal, create a system that would give humans a sense of order and purpose in chaos. The result was this algorithm, a quantum field that interacts with human consciousness, creating the perception of death dates." "But how?" Lena pressed. "And why can some people see them while others can't?" "The algorithm operates on quantum entanglement principles," Novik explained. "It doesn't just predict death, it enforces it. Once a person perceives their death date, or has it perceived for them, they become locked into that quantum trajectory. Their consciousness is literally constrained to that timeline." "That's insane," Ghost interjected. "You're saying the government programmed the entire human race to die at specific times?" "Not exactly," Novik corrected. "The algorithm calculates the most probable natural death based on genetic, environmental, and quantum factors. It then locks that probability in place, making it a certainty rather than a possibility." "And people like us?" Lena asked quietly. "The ones without visible dates?" Novik's expression softened. "You are the algorithm's failures. Individuals whose quantum signatures resist entanglement. The system can't establish a fixed endpoint for your consciousness because you exist in a state of quantum superposition. Multiple potential futures, all equally valid." "The Eternals," Eon added. "A romantic name, but essentially accurate," Novik acknowledged. "Your consciousness isn't bound by the same constraints as others. Theoretically, you could persist indefinitely." Lena felt dizzy with the implications. "But that's not possible. Everyone dies eventually." "The physical body, yes," Novik agreed. "But consciousness? We've barely begun to understand its true nature. The algorithm doesn't just predict death, it limits human potential, capping what might otherwise be an exponential evolution of consciousness." Ghost, who had been examining the projected equation with growing interest, suddenly pointed to a section. "This signature, I recognize it." She turned to Novik with narrowed eyes. "This is Magnus Vale's work, the probability architect." Novik's face hardened. "Dr. Magnus Vale was my colleague and the primary creator of the algorithm. He's also the one who ensured I disappeared when I discovered the truth and threatened to expose it." "Dr. Vale," Lena repeated, the name stirring a distant memory. "The head of the registry program?" "The very same," Novik confirmed grimly. "He's spent decades refining his system, eliminating anomalies, people like us, and tightening the quantum constraints on humanity." "And this purge Eon mentioned?" Lena asked. "Vale has developed a new version of the algorithm, one that can identify and neutralize quantum anomalies on a massive scale. If implemented, it will eliminate all Eternals and prevent any more from emerging. Humanity will be permanently locked into predetermined endings." The room fell silent as they absorbed this information. Finally, Ghost spoke up. So what's your plan? How do you fight something that's literally woven into human consciousness? Novik smiled thinly. With the right counter-algorithm and the combined quantum signatures of enough Eternals, we can disrupt the system, not just for us, but for everyone. You want to remove all death dates? Lena asked, alarmed. Wouldn't that cause mass panic? Not remove, Novik clarified. Transform, from constraints to possibilities. People would still see potential endpoints, but as probabilities rather than certainties. Choice would be restored to human existence. And you need me for this. Lena realized. My exceptional genetic profile. Novik nodded solemnly. Your quantum signature is uniquely compatible with the disruption sequence we've developed. With you as the focal point, we believe we can generate enough quantum interference to destabilize Vale's algorithm. At what cost? Lena pressed, sensing there was more. What happens to the focal point in this scenario? Novik hesitated, confirming Lena's suspicion. There would be significant neural strain. The process has never been attempted at this scale. You're asking her to risk her life, Ghost said bluntly. Possibly sacrifice it. To free humanity from an invisible prison, Novik countered. To restore our potential as a species. Lena's mind reeled with the enormity of the choice before her. All her life, she had hidden what she was, seeing her condition as a burden. Now she was being told it was actually a gift. Perhaps the most important gift anyone could possess. Before she could respond, an alarm blared throughout the complex. One of the Eternals rushed into the command center. Professor, government forces have breached the outer perimeter. They're using the new scanning technology. They can detect our quantum signatures through the shielding. Novik's face paled. How many? At least 3 squads, with drone support. And, Professor, they've brought him. Dr. Vale is leading the operation personally. The name sent a visible shudder through Novik. How long do we have? 20 minutes, maybe less. Novik turned to Lena, her composure cracking slightly. It seems our timeline has been compressed. We need to make a decision now. What about evacuation? Ghost demanded. You must have contingencies. The storm outside makes surface escape impossible, Novik explained. And they've likely blocked the underground routes already. So we fight, Eon said with surprising conviction. Novik shook her head. Against government forces? We'd be slaughtered, she fixed her gaze on Lena. Our only option is to implement the disruption immediately, before Vale can deploy his new algorithm. But you said it wasn't ready, Lena protested. That you needed more Eternals, more preparation. We have enough to create a localized disruption, Novik insisted. Not permanent, not universal, but enough to disable their scanning technology and create a window for escape. Ghost, who had been studying the security feeds, interjected. Whatever you're doing, do it fast. They're deploying neural dampening fields as they advance. Once those are in place, your quantum, whatever won't work. Lena looked around at the community of Eternals, people who, like her, had lived their lives as anomalies. They were preparing defenses, moving the vulnerable to inner chambers, facing the prospect of capture, or worse, with grim determination. Show me what I need to do, she said finally. Relief flooded Novik's features. This way, quickly. She led Lena to an adjacent laboratory, where a circular platform stood surrounded by complex equipment. Other Eternals were already taking positions at various stations. This device amplifies and synchronizes our quantum signatures, Novik explained, guiding Lena onto the central platform. As the focal point, you'll experience the combined resonance most intensely. Will it hurt? Lena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Novik's hesitation was answer enough. Focus on why we're doing this, on the freedom we're fighting for. As Novik stepped away to coordinate the other Eternals, Ghost approached the platform. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. We could still find another way out. Lena smiled sadly. I've spent my whole life hiding what I am. Ghost. Maybe it's time I finally used it for something meaningful. The tech specialist studied her for a moment, then nodded. For what it's worth, I think you're either the bravest or the craziest person I've ever met. She extended her hand, and Lena took it gratefully. Keep Eon safe if this goes wrong, Lena requested. Count on it, Ghost promised. Stepping back as the equipment around the platform hummed to life, Novik's voice came through a communication system. Beginning synchronization sequence. Lena, try to clear your mind. The process works best when conscious interference is minimized. Lena closed her eyes, attempting to quiet her racing thoughts. Around her, the hum of machinery intensified. She felt a strange tingling sensation across her skin, as if every cell in her body was becoming alert to something beyond normal perception. Quantum signatures aligning, someone announced. Resonance building. The tingling transformed into a vibration that seemed to penetrate to her very atoms. Lena's breathing quickened as the sensation grew more intense. Behind her closed eyelids, patterns of light began to form, intricate, fractal structures that shifted and evolved with mesmerizing complexity. Neural interface active, Novik reported. Lena, you should be beginning to perceive the quantum field directly now. The description hardly did justice to what Lena was experiencing. The patterns weren't just visual, they were somehow meaningful, as if she was seeing the underlying structure of reality itself. Within this structure, she began to recognize a recurring motif, a complex pattern that seemed artificially imposed upon the natural flow. The algorithm, she whispered in realization. Yes, Novik confirmed. You're seeing Vale's work, the constraint matrix he embedded into human consciousness. As Lena focused on this pattern, she became aware of how it connected to other consciousnesses, thin threads of probability extending outward from her perception, linking to countless others. Along each thread glowed a date, death dates, she realized, but seen from within the system that generated them. Resonance approaching critical threshold, someone announced tensely. Disruption field forming. The vibration within Lena intensified painfully. She gasped as pressure built inside her skull, threatening to overwhelm her. Through the pain, she maintained her focus on the algorithm's pattern, instinctively understanding that she needed to create a counter pattern, a resonant frequency that would interfere with Vale's design. Outside her awareness, alarms blared as government forces breached the outer defenses of the complex. Ghost and Eon had taken up defensive positions near the laboratory entrance, along with other Eternals capable of fighting. They're advancing too quickly, Ghost shouted over the commotion. The dampening fields are already affecting the outer sections. Novik's voice was strained. We need another minute to achieve full disruption. Hold them off. In the quantum space Lena now inhabited, she sensed a new presence, a consciousness that moved with purpose through the field, examining and reinforcing the algorithm's structure. Unlike the other presences she perceived, this one seemed to recognize her, focusing its attention on her intrusion. With a shock of recognition, Lena understood she was encountering Dr. Magnus Vale himself, not physically, but his consciousness operating through the algorithm he had created. Fascinating. His presence seemed to communicate a natural anomaly with sufficient quantum awareness to perceive the system. You must be the one Rhea has been sheltering. Lena recoiled from the contact, but Vale's consciousness followed, examining her quantum signature with clinical interest. Such potential, wasted on Rhea's misguided crusade. He continued, You don't understand what you're interfering with. The algorithm doesn't constrain humanity. It saves it from the chaos of unlimited possibility. You've made people prisoners of predetermined fates. Lena projected back at him. I've given them certainty in an uncertain universe. Vale countered. Without the algorithm, human consciousness fractures across infinite timelines. Never achieving coherence or purpose, I've created unity from quantum chaos. As they clashed in the quantum field, the physical confrontation in the complex escalated. Government forces had breached the laboratory's outer defenses. Ghost and the others fell back to the final perimeter, using overloaded power cells as improvised explosives to slow the advance. "Professor!" Ghost shouted. "Whatever you're doing, finish it now." In the quantum space, Lena sensed Vale's growing influence as his physical presence approached. The disruption field she and the other Eternals had generated was weakening under his counterattack. "You cannot win this anomaly," Vale's presence communicated. "My understanding of the quantum field exceeds anything Rhea could have taught you. Stand down, and I may preserve your consciousness for study." But as Vale's confidence grew, Lena made a discovery. Within the intricate pattern of the algorithm, she identified a vulnerability, a resonant frequency that Vale himself had introduced as a control mechanism, a way for him to modify the system as needed. With sudden clarity, Lena understood what she needed to do. Instead of trying to disrupt the entire algorithm at once, an impossible task with their limited resources, she could use Vale's own access point to introduce a cascading instability. "Novik!" she called out physically, her voice strained. "The control frequency. We need to target the administrative override." Though barely conscious of the physical world, Lena heard Novik's startled response. "Of course, recalibrating disruption field to harmonic frequency 9957.3. The equipment around Lena hummed at a new pitch. In the quantum space, she felt the disruption field shift, aligning precisely with Vale's control frequency. His presence reacted with alarm. "Stop! You don't understand what you're doing!" Vale's consciousness projected frantically. "Destabilizing the control frequency will create a cascading collapse throughout the entire system." "Exactly," Lena responded, channeling all her focus into amplifying the disruption. In the physical world, the laboratory doors burst open. Government forces poured in, led by an elderly man with cold eyes and an imperious bearing, Dr. Magnus Vale in the flesh. He carried a device that pulsed with energy similar to the equipment surrounding Lena. "Shut it down, Rhea," he commanded. "You're risking a system-wide neural shock that could damage millions." Novik stood defiant before her former colleague. "Better temporary pain than eternal constraint? Magnus?" Vale signaled his forces to target the equipment. "Disable the amplifiers. Leave the focal subject unharmed." As soldiers moved to comply, Ghost and Eon launched a desperate counterattack from their position. The laboratory erupted into chaos. Weapons fire, shouted commands, equipment sparked and smoked. In the quantum field, the battle reached its climax. Lena, drawing on the combined signatures of all the Eternals connected to the system, focused the full force of the disruption on Vale's control frequency. His consciousness fought back, attempting to stabilize the algorithm, but the vulnerability she had identified proved decisive. With a sensation like glass shattering across multiple dimensions, the control frequency collapsed. The disruption spread outward in a quantum wave, temporarily disabling the death date perception throughout Aurelia. In the physical world, everyone, government forces and Eternals alike, staggered as their neural implants momentarily overloaded. Many collapsed, clutching their heads in pain. Vale himself fell to his knees, his face contorted in shock and fury. "What have you done?" he gasped, staring at Lena with a mixture of rage and horrified respect. Lena, released from the quantum interface as the equipment shut down, could barely stand. Supported by Novik, she faced Vale across the chaotic laboratory. "Given them a choice," she answered, her voice weak but determined. Vale struggled to his feet, his composure returning. "A temporary disruption, nothing more. The algorithm will reset within hours. All you've accomplished is to alert every citizen of Aurelia to your interference." "That was the point," Novik said with grim satisfaction. The truth exposed at last. Your precious system revealed as the artificial constraint it is. Before Vale could respond, Ghost appeared beside them, supporting an injured Ian. Hate to break up the philosophical debate, but we have about 2 minutes before their neural systems recover, and we're all executed for treason. Novik nodded sharply. The evacuation tunnels. While their systems are down, we can access the emergency transport. As they move to escape, Vale called after them, his voice regaining its authoritative edge. This isn't over. Rhea, the algorithm is hardwired into human consciousness now. Even if they know the truth, they'll choose certainty over chaos. Novik paused, looking back at her former colleague, perhaps. But now they'll have that choice, won't they? Led by Ghost, who seemed least affected by the neural disruption, they navigated through the complex toward a hidden evacuation point. Around them, other Eternals were also fleeing, taking advantage of the temporary confusion among the government forces. The evacuation tunnel led to a small hangar where several outdated but functional transport vessels waited. Designed for emergency research team extraction, the vessels offered their only hope of escaping Aurelia entirely. "Can you fly this thing?" Lena asked Ghost as they approached the nearest transport. "I can fly anything," the tech specialist replied with forced confidence. Already accessing the control system, the question is whether it can withstand the acid storm long enough to reach the Outlands. "It's our only option," Novik stated, helping more Eternals board the various transports. The disruption won't last long. Once Vale regains control, he'll lock down every sector of Aurelia. As they prepared for departure, Lena found herself standing with Ian near the transport's viewport. The boy's expression was solemn beyond his years. "I always believed we would succeed," he said quietly, "but I never thought about what comes after. Where do we go from here?" Lena placed a hand on his shoulder. "I don't know, but for the first time, it feels like we have a choice in determining our future." Ghost's voice interrupted from the cockpit. "Strap in! This launch is going to be rough!" The transport shuddered as its ancient engines ignited. Around them, the other vessels were also coming to life, their systems protesting after years of disuse. Through the viewport, Lena could see government forces beginning to recover, some already attempting to seal the hangar doors. "Too late," Ghost muttered with satisfaction as their transport lurched upward, breaking through the weakened barrier of the research district's protective dome. They emerged into the full fury of Nova Terra's acid storm, the vessel's hull immediately beginning to sizzle under the caustic assault. "Activating atmospheric shields," Novik announced from a secondary control panel. "They won't last long, but they should get us beyond the storm front." The transport climbed higher, joined by the other vessels carrying the remaining Eternals. Below them, Aurelia spread out like a gleaming web of light against Nova Terra's hostile landscape, beautiful and terrible in its isolation. As they broke through the worst of the storm into the relative calm of the upper atmosphere, Lena felt a strange sensation, a lightening, as if a weight she had carried her entire life had finally been lifted. Looking around at the others, she saw similar expressions of wonder and uncertainty. "The algorithm is resetting," Novik explained, noticing their reactions. "Vale is regaining control of the system, but the disruption achieved its purpose. Everyone in Aurelia experienced the truth. If only for a moment." "Will it be enough?" Lena asked. Novik's expression was resolute. "Truth has a way of persisting, even when suppressed. We've planted the seed of doubt in Vale's perfect system. Now we build on that foundation." Ghost called back from the cockpit. "I've set course for the Outland settlements. They're independent from Aurelia's governance, refugees, outcasts, people who chose the harshness of Nova Terra over life under the algorithm's constraints." "They'll welcome us?" Ian asked skeptically. "They welcome anyone willing to fight for true freedom," Novik assured him. "And we bring valuable knowledge." As the transport soared toward the distant horizon, leaving Aurelia and its artificial certainties behind, Lena returned to the viewport. The empty space above her head, where a death date should have been, no longer felt like a deficiency or a curse, but a canvas of unlimited possibility. "You never told me," she said to Ian, who had joined her at the window. "How did you find out what you were? When did you realize you were different?" The boy's unnaturally bright eyes reflected the strange light of Nova Terra's atmosphere. "I didn't," he answered simply. "I was born in the Outlands, among people who already knew the truth. I was sent to Aurelia to find others like us, people with the potential to break the algorithm." "And now?" Lena asked. Eon's gaze turned toward the uncertain future that awaited them. "Now we build something new, a society without predetermined endings, a world where each person writes their own story." Behind them, Ghost called out navigation coordinates while Novik organized the surviving Eternals. The vessel shuddered as it pushed through Nova Terra's turbulent upper atmosphere, carrying them toward a future without the constraints of visible death dates, a future of unlimited possibility, uncertainty, and hope. As Aurelia faded into the distance, Lena thought of all the people below whose consciousness had briefly tasted freedom from Vale's algorithm. Some would choose to forget, preferring the comfort of certainty. Others would question, seek, perhaps even rebel. The disruption had been temporary, but its effects would ripple outward in ways even Vale couldn't predict. For herself, Lena embraced the vast unknown that stretched before her. She had spent her life hiding what she was, seeing her difference as a burden to be concealed. Now she understood it was a gift, not just the absence of a death date, but the presence of unlimited potential. Whatever came next, she would face it not as an anomaly or an aberration, but as what she truly was, an eternal, unbound by predetermined endings, free to write her own destiny in the infinite space where a death date should have been. And for the first time in her life, that empty space felt exactly right.